what makes someone remarkable? Do you mind being described as the white people whisperer? What is the optimal age to get married?
That year was the first year that we ever heard a teacher talk about race.
Is the college application process fair?
You start to find the non-obvious way kind of works.
Is there like a cartoonist community? So many times when we go live with these things, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom. Welcome to this very special edition of the Non-Obvious Book Review. I am Rohit Bhargava, and yes, I am sporting my non-obvious glasses in honor of this very exciting day, but I'm going to take them off because I got to be able to see you now. This is our big announcement of the short list of the winners for the Non-Obvious Book Awards. And it's a process that we've been going through for the last 6 months in our entire team. We've been sent so many different books. And some of you might have seen a couple weeks ago, we did our long list announcement. And it was our top 100 titles from the book awards. And those were all on the long list. And if you haven't checked them out, you definitely should. You can go to nonobviousbookawards.com/2022. Check out the full list. There's 100 books there that are all amazing and definitely worth reading. And I highly recommend all of them. A lot of people ask, what was the process that we went through to get to this list? How do we get to all those things? And we're going to answer all of those things. And I'm really excited because we've got an amazing program for you. But first of all, I just want to tell you a little bit about these awards in case you're not that familiar with them. So a couple of quick facts about the awards. The first is that we are entirely dedicated to business books. There's a lot of book awards out there where they have a business category. We very intentionally don't do that. We invite submissions of all types of books that apply in some way to business, but they don't always have to be business books, which is really exciting for us because we get so many different books on so many different topics, as you'll see today in this live stream. And we're always thinking about, well, how does this apply to business? How does this apply to our career? But a lot of our choices sometimes aren't necessarily business books. So that's really exciting for us. And we had, as you can see from the data points here, a ton of submissions this year. And so it was really challenging. I mean, I have huge respect for anybody who spends their time to write a book, to submit their book. And we had so many great ones that it was really, really hard to decide. So that was just a really big challenge in doing anything like this. But we're very proud of the 100 that we selected for the long list. And today they represent lots of different imprints and publishers as well, which is really awesome. We don't accept any payment for any of these entries. So a lot of book awards programs, you sort of pay to enter. We wanted to make it open for everyone. So there's no money involved for anyone to enter these awards. And like I said, we've got our long list and we've got the short list. And so what we're going to do today is talk about books. And I love books. I mean, here's an image of how I read books. And a lot of the books that we have submitted from the book awards, I mean, they have all these colored tabs. Luckily, I got a huge box of them sent to me when I did this whole thing for Post-it. So I have been using those a lot, but that's how I read these books. And that's how the rest of the team reads them as well, because we're really trying to internalize a lot of the big ideas here. And so now when we talk about the book awards program, we've got a couple things we're going to do today. So let me give you a big program of what the plan is for this show right now. The first thing we're going to do is talk about 7 big themes from the show. So there were 7 interesting things that I saw from various books that our team submitted. And so we put those all together to talk about sort of how do we look at it's sort of a year in the review when it comes to books. So we've curated 7 macro themes. We're going to share those with you. Then we'll talk about some of the best book titles of the year and a worst book title of the year. We'll also talk about some of the best book cover designs. And then we'll announce the short list, which will be 10 books. And then we have 5 winners in 5 different categories. So we'll announce those at the end as well. So this is our award show. We're ready to go. And the first place that we've got to start with is looking at the themes. So the first theme I want to share with you is saving books. All of these books talked about bookstores and books in some way. So as bookstores come under threat, authors explore the evolution of language and passionately defend books and those who sell them. And this was a really interesting theme because book people love books. Makes sense. But a lot of these books talked about, now that we're emerging from the pandemic, what happens to bookstores and what happens to books. Really interesting theme. Second big theme that we saw was underappreciated women. So there were all of these wonderful stories. There was Let's Get Physical by Danielle Friedman, talking about women's role in fitness and the evolution of fitness for women. There's stories of memoirs of women who were underappreciated. Lori Garver is from NASA, talking about running NASA. So there were lots of different topics around this idea that these women had previously been unsung, and now they were profiled and celebrated in all of these books. And it was really wonderful to see that. Several books actually talked about stewardesses in aviation as well, which was just an interesting topic I didn't know anything about until I saw some of these books. So sometimes that's what it does. It really unlocks it for us. The third big theme we saw was Take Back the Web. The battle for the soul of the internet is alive, and these books define what's at stake and expose the manipulators so we can reclaim the web together. There's lots of forces out there right now for surveillance, for misusing data, AI, deep fakes. I mean, you name it. There's lots of issues when it comes to how the internet's playing this role in our lives. And all of these books were sort of exploring what that means and how we can sort of take back control in a more positive way. The next big trend was talk to animals. This was not one that I expected, but all of these books in some way focused on our connection with animals and what we can learn about how we communicate with one another and how we communicate and take care of the earth through all of these books. One of them, An Immense World, was actually just named today one of the top 10 books of the year by the New York Times. And so this was a really interesting subject area. And I just found it fascinating that there were this many books all talking about this one topic, all great books. Fifth theme was emerge from COVID. What do we do next? The Great Reset, the end of the burnout. Part of these books talked about the Great Resignation, kind of coming back. And we're in a time right now where there's so much flux in the workplace. I mean, layoffs, people dealing with moving careers, having to move careers, even if they didn't anticipate they had to. And what happens to business now that we had this kind of big moment where a lot of things changed for a lot of people. Hybrid work, that's another part of this. So this was a kind of a macro idea that spanned from now that we're in 2022 and we're coming out of this. And remember, most of the books that were published in 2022 probably were mostly written in 2021 in the midst of people coming out of this. And so we see that reflection in these. Sixth big theme was decoding bad. Dictators, authoritarians, and other bad actors are seemingly winning. And these books explore what makes evil triumph and how we can all fight back. And so not only was it dictators and authoritarians, it was also cults. There was a great book about cults. There was a book exposed from Garrett Graff talking about Watergate and the whole story there, really long, deep, incisive commentary. There was a book about what's the matter with Delaware. Another one about why people why innocent people get stuck in prison. And all of these were kind of about taking apart this apparatus of bad and trying to figure out how we can do better. And the last theme that I'll share with you is be comfortable with yourself. What does it take to live your best life and be comfortable with yourself? These post-pandemic titles explore how to be okay, maybe even happy. And so there were lots of different dimensions of this one. But I loved this as a macro trend too. And happiness and self-fulfillment is a constant theme in self-help books. But it was just really interesting to see that in all of these different books across 2022. And so we had so many books coming in, hundreds of books, all sort of lined up. And when you have an opportunity to kind of see just what was published in 2022 and late 2021, we consider books from November and December of 2021, because those were probably too late to be submitted last year. So it's those books as well as all of the books until now. When we get all of these books, it's really interesting to see some of these macro themes. And so we started thinking a lot about those as we were doing the judging for the book awards. So now I want to take you through a really rapid fire look at some of the best titles and cover designs, because I'm a book person. I love books. If you're watching this, you're probably a book person too. And so you're probably curious, like, what were the best titles and why were they the best titles? And so here are some of my picks for the best titles, book titles of 2022. And I want to take you through these very quickly and just talk a little bit about each one because I love titling. And to me, like titling books is titling brands. That's basically, you know, what it is. It's branding a book. And I love that. I love the thinking behind that because I know how much thinking goes behind it. So first one that I'll share with you is this one, Happy People Are Annoying. And it's got this great picture of Josh Peck, actor. I mean, who wouldn't just pick up this book just to figure out, like, what is he talking about? Happy people are annoying. And, you know, frankly, the picture is great because he does look kind of annoying on the cover. So it works. Everything about that works. This one is a very unusual book. It's called Tokyoids, and it's pictures of buildings in Tokyo that look like robot faces. Super unique, great title for a book like this. Again, not one that I expected to be on the list, but really, really interesting. This one, Hollywood Ending, perfect title for a book that exposes a lot of how Hollywood actually worked and some of the negative aspects of it. Double meaning. I'm a big fan of double meanings in titles. Hollywood Ending, you know, the end of Weinstein's reign, as well as the typical kind of Hollywood ending that's supposed to be happy. But in this case, for a lot of people, it wasn't. This book, I love the concept of undelivered. It's essentially all of the speeches that were the what if versions of the speeches that they didn't have to deliver, like the one that President Kennedy did not deliver because the moon landing was actually successful. But he had the alternate speech written just in case it didn't work out, and he was ready to go with that. So this book collects a lot of those speeches and shares them. It's a really fascinating kind of dystopian look at what could have happened in history through a lot of those. This book is all about indexes, and the title is Index, comma, A History of the. I mean, that's just so good. Like, it's exactly what you would expect in an index, and the title perfectly fits that. I mean, sometimes you get a title and it's just exactly what you would expect for a book like that. So good. This one was just a great pun. Get rich or lie trying. I mean, that one especially, right? And it's all about influencers and how a lot of times influencers are creating this fabricated life in order to make a profit, and it's working. And so this book was just a great example of taking something that already existed out there, a term, a phrase, and just putting that little bit of a twist when it came to the title of the book. This one is You'll Never Believe What Happened to Lacey. And it's two sisters who talk about all of the experiences that they've had of either overt racism or passive racism, or all of the things that they've encountered and just how unbelievable some of them are. And the stories in this book were wonderful. And the title of it is really great because it inspires your curiosity. I mean, you kind of want to know, like, oh, what happened to Lacey? Like, I want to know that. And the great titles, they do that. They pique your curiosity in that way. I'm also a big fan of one-word titles. This latest one from Susan Cain, who some of you might know from her book Quiet, is bittersweet. And you don't really see books oftentimes on bittersweetness. How Sorrow and Longing Make Us Whole. That's the subtitle of the book. So sometimes taking a word that is unusual, unfamiliar, and then putting it out there, it's a great way to own something. This new one, 100 Animals That Can Fucking End You. So good. Mamadou Naidaye, he was one of the speakers at our Beyond Diversity Summit, if you remember that from last year. Amazing comedian, great speaker. If you're looking for a speaker at an event or an MC, he's amazing, did a great job. And this book is just really fun. It's a lot of animals that literally can end you and how you wouldn't want to encounter most of them. And so a little bit of a different take on the whole talk to animals thing. This one's the avoid animals version of it, but still a fun, interesting title. This book was a great one. It made our long list, and it was all about libraries. And again, double meaning, overdue in terms of books being overdue, but overdue also in terms of just talking about the truth behind libraries and what librarians have to deal with and taking you inside of that world. And really well-written book. Great title for it as well. Sticking on the subject of books, this one from the ALA, Read These Banned Books. Again, curiosity. Read these banned books. Okay, what are the banned books? Like, now I want to know. And that's what really good titles do. They have this great element of curiosity. Another one that I really like, This Monk Wears Heels, Be Who You Are. Personal story, but again, really interesting title. Like you just want to know more about the author's story. You want to, even if you're unfamiliar with the author, you just want to read a little bit more about it. There was a memoir, not a memoir, but a biography of Keanu Reeves, and the title of that was Most Triumphant. So good. That's what Keanu Reeves, that's one of his catchphrases. Put it in a cover of a book. Totally makes sense. I mean, that one maybe is kind of obvious, but yeah, it was good. Sometimes a good title is controversial. So The Dumbest Generation Grows Up. Yeah, if you're part of what the author calls the dumbest generation, you probably don't like this book, and it's going to stir up some emotions for you. But clearly the author's going for that, and it works for this title of this book because that's actually what it's about. Now, the perspective of it's not quite so controversial, but the title really goes far in that direction, and sometimes that's a successful strategy. This one, You Sound Like a White Girl, The Case for Rejecting Assimilation. Again, you get the perspective of the book right from the title, which is what a great successful title does. It gives you a sense of, okay, this is what the book's going to talk about. I know what I'm going to get. This was a very unusual title, If Nietzsche Were a Narwhal. And it's, again, What Animal Intelligence Reveals About Human Stupidity. Great title, great subtitle, fascinating combination. Really, really good stuff. I did promise, I'm going to do something very unusual for a moment here. I promised that I would share the worst book title as well. I'm generally not in the business of putting out what I think the worst stuff is, because that's just not my personality. But this was just this book, Killing Sacred Cows, about personal finance. I mean, I'm not offended as a Hindu. I'm offended as a publisher. I mean, this is just lazy work on a title. Like, anybody should be able to do better. Like, this is 2022. We don't need that anymore. Like, come on, let's get better than that. So those were the titles. And now I want to give you a look at some of my favorite book cover designs of the full year. And these were some great cover designs from many great designers, some of which we've worked with in the past. And so the first one I'll talk about is Butts. And this book is exactly what it's about exactly what you think it is. It's about butts. But putting a peach on there as the version of the butt, just a really smart choice that make the book maybe a little bit more friendly to bookstores who wouldn't necessarily want to put a book on the shelves that literally has a butt. Putting a peach up there, like, kind of makes sense. This was a memoir from a pilot called Imagine a City. Really great, beautiful cover design, very unique. I love the handwritten work on there. Really nicely done. Very, very good job. A book about being bisexual, perfect with the Venn diagrams. I mean, we see Venn diagrams used quite a bit in business books, but doing it in this way for this topic just felt like a perfect fit, and really distinctive colors. There are not many books that have this color combination on the cover, and so it really stood out because of that. This was a book called An Economist Goes to the Game, about the economics of sports. And I love the way that they took the jersey and integrated the data chart into the jersey. It's just a really clever visual that perfectly fits the topic of the book, which is sports and data together, putting those both together. This book is a personal and cultural history of blindness. And you probably can't see it, but there's Braille written on the cover here and on the spine as well. It's written in Braille. So it's just a really nice nod to exactly what the topic of the book was, and very nicely done in terms of the printing of it as well. And so what you'll find with a lot of these is, like, the cover design is beautiful, but it also has to be printed in a beautiful way. Otherwise, it doesn't stand out the way that it could. Here's another one, really distinctive cover and huge color. So this one doesn't really have any icons or images. It just has this really distinctive color that totally pops. I mean, imagine seeing this on a bookstore shelf. It would catch your eye. And that's an element of a great cover as well. This book, I was very excited to see this one come through. It's the Lego story, and it is the it's the official biography of Lego. And this entire book is just a beautiful, beautiful book. I mean, if you have somebody in your life who loves Legos, this is going to be a great gift book. Not only does it have a beautiful cover design, but the entire interior is sort of got all these color photos. It's like it's almost like a coffee table book. and a full-length book about a business at the same time. Really nicely done. This one, Eating to Extinction, is just a really nice kind of old school hand-drawn images of all of these fruits and vegetables that may not exist in the future. And so topic is great, the world's rarest foods. It's got the intrigue, and the cover was really nice and simple. I love the execution of that one. This one's called 8 Billion and Counting, How Sex, Death, and Migration Shape Our World. Big colors, and also just a nice way of reeling a text-only cover. Some of these covers you'll see, I mean, they don't have a lot of visuals. They're just text-only, but they really do a nice job of bringing that to life. This was an excellent, excellent book by Kim Kelly called Fight Like Hell. Beautiful cover, really pops. Great use of text fonts. And then I just love the integration of this sort of, I can't remember what it's called, like a blowhorn. Is that what it's called? I can't remember. You'll correct me. But, you know, it's like that thing that makes you like super loud, which makes sense for a book about fighting like hell. So it was just a great execution, really nice integration of all the words. Subtitle, I like the way that also from a text hierarchy point of view, the title's below, but the real kind of gist of what the book's about is the subtitle, and so they put that up front above, which is a really nice choice because you get immediately from looking at this exactly what the book is about. This one, The Liar, is all about a memoir of a double agent in the CIA who became the Cold War's last honest man. And so you kind of imagine a time period where this book is set, and the way that the fonts are chosen and this sort of black and white sepia toned image in there, it all perfectly evokes that time of when this book was set. And so it really did a nice job of bringing that moment to life through the cover, I thought. This book's called The Generation Myth, Why When You're Born Matters Less Than You Think. And all of these different words in here are all the different generations. Generation Z, the greatest generation, Generation X, baby boomers. And so it's just a nice integration of words. You kind of can see a little bit of those. It doesn't, my lights are maybe a little too bright for you to really get the view of this, but if you look at a screenshot of that, you'll really appreciate it. This one was actually a memoir, not exactly a business title per se, but I just really loved the cover of it because it fit perfectly, hysterical. And I thought this one was interesting because the cover is quite light, but if you look at the spine, it's done in this really hot pink, bright thing. So if the book was on a shelf like this, it would really pop with just the title. Or if you just saw the cover like this, it would pop. And so sometimes the thought process behind what goes on the spine versus what goes on the cover, really interesting stuff. This one is A Cultural History of France. And this one I like not only because of the design of it and the sort of old school look of it, but also the way that it's printed. It's got this almost like an uncoated paper, almost like thin cardboard that feels perfect for the execution of how they actually did this book. So it was really nicely executed as well. This one also has kind of that uncoated paper, but it's The Age of the Strong Man. And it's got this really stark image on there. And the way that the subtitle sort of narrowly leads you towards it was just the type styling of this was just really nicely done and really clean, simple, and it totally works. And the last book cover that I'll share with you is Chuck Klosterman's book, The 90s. And yeah, I might be dating myself, but I'm pretty sure I had a phone that looked like that. And so as soon as I saw that phone, to me, I knew what this book was about. And I was a kid in the 90s. You know, I was in college in the 90s. And so that moment in time and that image really spoke to me. And obviously that was the point of the book, that it would speak to someone in that way that would bring it to life. So those were some of the best book titles and book covers of the year. If you've been watching this so far, we are announcing, and we're about to announce, the shortlist winners for the Non-Obvious Book Awards. If you like content like this, I highly recommend you check out my email newsletter, which I publish every Thursday. It's called the Non-Obvious Insights Newsletter. This year, it was honored with a Webby Award. So we've got a lot of people reading and enjoying the newsletter. I would love to have you among them. It's obviously free, and it's just the most interesting stories of the week. So if you love books, I talk about books all the time. If you love other content, that will also be there as well. So as we get into the shortlist announcement, this is the big announcement part of the show. I just want to say thank you to all of the authors who submitted your books for the book awards. I mentioned up top at the beginning of the show, it was so difficult to choose who the winners were, and we really appreciated all of the entries. It was an amazing time reading a lot of these. And again, I love authors. And so we're just so honored to be able to present these and talk about the shortlist with all of you. So here we go. If I had a drum here, I actually do have a drum back there, but I didn't coordinate to get the drum roll. So just imagine a drum roll in your head. Imagine the drum roll. And here we go with the shortlist announcement. The first choice here for the shortlist is I Never Thought of It That Way by Monica Guzman. And I'll share a quote from the book with you just to bring it to life. We have to stop assuming that people who disagree with us don't value what we value. Instead, we have to redirect our curiosity toward a critical question. What do they value more? This book was a really interesting exploration of something that I have always believed, which is that we have to embrace people who don't think like us and try to challenge our perspective and our point of view. And that's what the author does when she talks to her parents specifically, who believe different political views than she has. And she has those really difficult conversations. She goes out and talks to people and finds some fascinating things. And one of the stories she tells in the book that was really interesting is all about being part of a journalism team that brought people from the city together with people from a rural area and just had them talk face to face. And the big conclusion you'll get after reading this book is that it is impossible to be as mean and rude and dismissive of someone who you meet face to face as it is to do that to them in social media. And the solution to more of bringing people together is just us trying to interact with people more instead of just responding to something quickly in a comment on social media. So great book, really important topic, fascinatingly done. Congratulations to Monica and the team behind this book. And I want to make sure to mention that every one of these books isn't just one person. The person whose name is on the cover is obviously the author, but every one of them has an entire team behind it. And just like that, we have an entire team at Non-Obvious and at our entire group that has been working on these book awards. And so I want to say thank you to all of those team members as well. Everyone who provided early reading suggestions for books, everyone who came up with all the images for us, all of our team. I'm just so grateful because this is not a solitary effort. It's not just me. My producer and co-founder, Chavi, is doing all the live production as well. So it's a whole team behind it. And we're really, really excited by what came out of it. And I just want to say thank you to everyone. So the next big book on our shortlist is The Band of Sisters, How to Dismantle Gender Bias in the Workplace. The title of the book is You Should Smile More. Again, another great book. Let me read a quote from this book for you. When you see a woman in high gear, if you're thinking to yourself, I don't know how she does it, consider the possibility that the image she's creating is false and bad for all of us. Instead of marveling at her superwoman behavior, reach out and see if she needs support. This book is really fascinating because it was written by 6 different authors who were all female executives in the workplace. And the way that the book structured to me was particularly interesting. So they talk about various situations that women are likely to face in the workplace, but then they break down each situation, and under each one, they say, if it's you, here's what you do. If you're the boss, here's what you do. And if you're the witness, someone who saw it, here's what you do. And so the way that the book's structured, I just found immediately useful and interesting and also approachable for me, who's not a female. I'm not a female executive, but there's still a role that I can play as a witness or maybe as a boss who sees some of these behaviors happening and could speak up and do something about it. And so I felt empowered to do something, even though maybe I wasn't necessarily the core targets that the book was written for. And that's what I think a lot of great books do. And some books that we read, and I read a lot of books that I'm definitely not the target audience for. And one of the things I'm looking for is, do I feel excluded or included as a potential reader of this book? Or do I feel like immediately the book wasn't written for me because of the language that's used or anything like that? So great job. Congratulations to the entire Band of Sisters for that. Next book on the list is How We Eat by Paco Underhill. And if you're not familiar with Paco Underhill, I've been reading his work for a long time. He's a consumer researcher and really pays attention to consumer behavior. And here's a quote from this book. Meals are just one more thing that we buy through the cold interface of an electronic device. I think there's something insidious and damaging about that. Without really noticing, we've become one step further removed from the source of our food. In How We Eat, Paco Underhill talks about all sorts of things that you may not realize in the way that not only food is produced, but the way that it's put on our shelves. Who pays for the shelf space? Why does someone get the top shelf versus the bottom shelf versus in the store at all? How do we get resupplied with the food that's actually out there? And how do we reconnect to the people who are actually growing the food instead of feeling this detachment from everything that we buy? So all of those things are aspects of this book. Like I said, when we're reading, like all of these books have this really fascinating ideas and tabs in there because that's how we read them. That's how I read them as well. And so all of these books on the short list, they've got lots and lots of tabs. That's part of the reason they're on the short list. And so congratulations to Paco Underhill. Fabulous book. Highly recommend it. Definitely you should check it out. Next book on the list is The Future is Analog by David Sachs. And I was very lucky actually to interview David very recently. And that episode has not yet come out, the episode of the Non-Obvious Book Review, but it will come out soon. And here's a quote from David's book. An analog future is not a rejection of progress. The analog future is thoughtfully choosing how we want to move forward on our own terms. If we want our human needs to come before digital technology's creators and investors, then we have to prioritize analog. So this book in particular, and I will mention, by the way, that some of these books, you'll see me holding up a paperback, but if you go out and buy it, you actually won't get this. You'll get the hardcover because this is what's called a advanced reader copy or a galley, as we call them in the publishing industry. You can sort of see a little language there. These versions are for media and reviewers that can read the book before it actually comes out. So just in case you're seeing this and wondering, hey, how come I can't get the paperback? Like some of these, I'm reviewing the actual ARC version, but the other version that you'll get will actually be the hardcover. Anyway, this book was fascinating because, again, it's something that I've been seeing also. I pay, as many of you know, I write non-obvious megatrends. I talk about trends. And so I'm often paying attention to a lot of the trends. And when I see something like that recognized in a book like this, it's really fascinating for me because what David did is he took a deep dive into all of the different analog experiences and talks about why we need them as humans. And it's a fascinating topic for a book. Again, highly recommended. Next book on the list was one that actually got a lot of accolades recently. Strangers to Ourselves, Unsettled Minds, and the Stories That Make Us by Rachel Aviv. And this book has been on a lot of different lists. Let me share a quote from the book with you. The divide between the psychic hinterlands and a setting we might call normal is permeable, a fact that I find both haunting and promising. It's starting to realize how narrowly we avoid or miss living radically different lives. So the book is really one of those kind of crossover titles, I think. You may not necessarily think this is immediately a business book, but really what it did for me is it helped me to explore like how my mind works, how all of our minds work, and also how the choices that we make or the situations that we're in might lead us towards either success or tragedy. And that's sort of what she talks about. The story that opens the book is about two different girls who are committed to a mental institution to deal with eating disorders and then have very different outcomes as a result of their experience. And so this book got a lot of different accolades. I think it made several different lists, and I thought it was just a great, engaging read. It was one of those books where really I didn't expect to love it, but I really couldn't put it down. And so I really recommend this one. It's a wonderful book. Next title that is on our short list is a wonderful term that it was introduced to me through the book, which is toxic positivity. Two things that don't typically go together. And let me share a quote from this book with you. Healthy positivity means making space for both reality and hope. Toxic positivity denies an emotion and forces us to suppress it. When we use toxic positivity, we are telling ourselves that others that this emotion shouldn't exist. It's wrong. And if we try just a little bit harder, we can eliminate it entirely. So toxic positivity was a great title for a book, but also a really important concept to remember, because I think a lot of times, especially in business, we find ourselves really focusing on the upside, really focusing on the optimism and bringing the happy all the time. And as you saw from that book title from Josh Peck, Happy People Are Annoying, I mean, that's kind of related to that a little bit. But what I thought was really interesting about this book was there were a lot of practical suggestions. There's lots of kind of bullet point lists and things in there. So it's written in such a way that it introduces the premise that you don't need to always be happy in order to be happy. And then it gives you some real things that you can apply to your life to actually make that real. And I thought that was just a nice way of doing it, and a well-written book on the short list. Congratulations. Next title that I'll share with you is The Shame Machine. And The Shame Machine was a really fascinating exploration of a topic that's been growing in popularity. And let me read you a quote from this book. The way out of today's shamescape involves recognizing what we all make mistakes, and some of us commit crimes. Sorry, I think that should be that we all. That's my typo. My bad. We are responsible for what we do and should make amends for it. But our mistakes and missteps shouldn't plunge us into everlasting shame. There has to be an expiration date. So that was, I swear, not on purpose, but I'm owning up to the mistake of the typo on the quote. But I am ashamed because, English majors should make typos like that. But anyway, the book is about how there's a shame complex and how so many products and services rely on our feeling ashamed in order to continually sell us more stuff. So it is a little bit anti-capitalist in that sense. But what the author talks about is reclaiming that for yourself and finding a way out of this sort of shame spiral, which he calls the shamescape, and creating a better way for all of us to interact. And I thought that in a world where our self-worth can be oftentimes very rolled up into the feedback that we get from people who don't even know us, this was a really important reminder that we have to treat ourselves better and get past this sort of feeling of shame in order to be more fulfilled in life. And I thought that was just an important topic. And so that was on our short list, and congratulations. All right. The next one, let me see here. All right. The next book. Okay. Next one on the list is How to Host a Viking Funeral. This one was a very entertaining book. Let me read you a quote from this one. Oh, and by the way, this is what the Viking ship that was built out of cardboard actually looked like. And the Viking ship built out of cardboard was burned. And I'll tell you the story of that in a second. But let me give you the quote from this book. So, healthy fears put a fence around your life that keeps you from going places that will get you hurt and that will get others hurt. The problem comes when our fears begin to keep us from things that aren't harmful to us at all. It forces you to live a life smaller than you're capable of living. So the author here, Kyle Scheel, is a professional speaker and creates lots of different interesting projects like this. And the idea for this one came from him turning 30 and deciding to build a cardboard Viking ship and then write in all of the things that he had done in his 20s and basically burn it as a way of saying, look, I'm moving forward. I'm not focusing on the past. And the idea went viral, and it inspired him to do a much bigger version of it, which is what this book is about. It's about the creation of that project. And what he inspired people to do was to write in stories of all of the things that they wanted to let go of, because then he could take those stories written on a piece of paper or a postcard or whatever and put it into the Viking ship and literally burn all of them. And so if this idea is reminiscent of Frank Warren and Post Secret, that is kind of what this concept was. But it was fascinating because so many people had so many things they wanted to let go of. And what I thought the book did a great job of reminding me and any of us to do is, whether it comes to business and your profession or life, there are things we all need to leave behind us and let go of. And if it's holding you back from moving forward, you really need to find a way to do that. And this book was a great way to do it, and a great title. I mean, How to Host a Viking Funeral. Intrigue built in. Perfect. And some really funny stories in there. I mean, the story of him trying to drive 50 pizzas home in his car, hot pizzas, was just, it had me laughing out loud. It was just too good. It's definitely worth a read book in particular. All right. Next one on the list. governments, and schools use games to control us all. And this one, let me read you a quote from the book. Often, gamification is used to manipulate and control, whether that's unscientific brain training games promising to make you smarter or propaganda games spreading dangerous misinformation. With today's gamification, you're no longer the player, you're being played. This was a fascinating exploration of a topic that I think we all maybe have seen out there, but don't necessarily think about all that much. And so it was a great refocus on that and some fascinating stories inside the book as well. Definitely recommend that one to pick up. All right. The last one on our short list before we talk about the 5 winners of the Non-Obvious Book Awards is this one called Of Boys and Men: Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why It Matters, and What to Do About It. Let me read you a quote from this one. We can hold 2 thoughts in our head at once. We can be passionate about women's rights and compassionate towards vulnerable boys and men. What is needed is a positive vision of masculinity that is compatible with gender equality. This one was really personal for me because not only am I male, but I have 2 boys. And one of the things that we've really been looking at and thinking about in the world is as we find more ways to empower women, we have to make sure that boys and men don't get left behind. And a lot of times people frame that as a political thing or as a controversial idea. And what I thought this book did a really nice job of is to say, look, we can do both. Like, just because we're elevating one group of people doesn't mean we have to leave another group behind. And if we do leave any group behind, the world is not better served because of that. If you're trying to solve inequality, you can't solve it in one place and then recreate it in another place. And so there were really interesting practical suggestions in the book, some of them likely to be controversial. I mean, the author suggests starting boys in school a year later than starting girls. I mean, there are some pretty big systemic ideas out there that would have a lot of people debating back and forth. But that's an important debate to have. And I thought the book was a really nice introduction to that, and done in a way that wasn't misogynistic, that wasn't just about promoting one group as opposed to another. It was pretty even and done in a very intellectual and intelligent way. And that's why I thought this book deserved to be on our shortlist. So now we are ready for the 5 winners. And if you are familiar with how we do the 5 winners, you know that they are in 5 different categories. This is the only type of categories we have in the Non-Obvious Book Awards. They are based on specific things that make the book stand out. And so the first book that I want to share with you, the big winner of our most useful book of 2022, is Thinking 101 by Woo Kyung-an. And this book, let me read a quote from the book. And this is a book that had a practical idea, a real down-to-earth advice on how to use this idea in your daily life. And the quote from the book is, "Thinking problems can cause troubles that go far beyond individual lives. These fundamental errors and biases contribute to a wide range of societal issues. Psychology can help people recognize and tackle some of these real-world problems and make better decisions." So this book is from a Yale professor, and it's inspired by the most popular course at Yale that's always booked out, all about how to think. Thinking is literally the title of the course. And what the author does really nicely is takes you inside of familiar psychological situations. So confirmation bias is one of the examples. The challenge of causal attribution is another one. And through stories of real life exercises that she's used in the classroom, the book brings to life how you can use behavioral psychology to improve your behavior and to be a better thinker. Really fascinating topic, inspired by something really important and well described in a book that is very readable. It's sort of a smaller size, a great gift size as well. Fascinating book to give to anyone who is a college student in your life, but also just anyone who might appreciate seeing the world from a slightly different perspective. So Thinking 101 was our choice for the most useful non-obvious book of 2022. Congratulations to Woo Kyung-an for this. Second title that I will share with you, second big winner, is our choice for the most shareable book of 2022, which is Quit by Annie Duke. And this is a viral idea that people will or should be talking about in conversation. And a quote from this one: "We tend to think only about one side of the human response to adversity, the ones who go for it. We don't seem to remember the quitters at all. How can we learn if we don't even see the quitters? Worse yet, how are we supposed to learn if, when we do see them, we view them negatively?" We do not see very many books all about how to quit. And by the way, I love the whole hanging up of the boxing gloves on the cover. Great analogy. But this is not a topic that we often kind of hear about, right? We talk about hustle. We talk about like keeping going. We talk about perseverance and grit. And what the author talks about is that those are not exclusionary ideas. Like you can have grit and you can have motivation and you can have perseverance, but you also sometimes need to have the awareness of when something should finish, when you should quit. And the powerful story she uses in the beginning of the book is climbers of Mount Everest, and how there were some who chose to be close to the peak, but then quit. And that's pretty high stakes. I mean, you spend years training sometimes for this and probably decades dreaming of doing it. And imagine getting 300 feet away from your goal and then having to make that choice to quit. I mean, it's a pretty extreme example, but what she talks about is that may be what's required in some cases. And you may not be on Everest making that choice, but this book will definitely help you think about when would be the right moment in time to stop doing something. And one of my favorite pieces of advice I remember hearing from a speaker on stage was, instead of just making a to-do list, write a stop doing list of things that you don't want to do anymore, that you need to quit doing. And this book sort of reminded me of that as well. So a really powerful idea, a great shareable idea, because we should be telling others, you know, if that's not working for you, maybe you need to quit and do something different. It's really powerful advice and not seen that often. And so Quit by Annie Duke was our choice for the most shareable non-obvious book of 2022. Next book I want to share with you is the most entertaining book of 2022. And this one was called Atlas of the Invisible, a readable and high impact story that you won't be able to put down. And a quote from this one: "For centuries, atlases depicted what people could see: roads, rivers, mountains. Today, we need graphics to reveal the invisible patterns that shape our lives. Atlas of the Invisible is an ode to the unseen, to a world of information that cannot be conveyed through text or numbers alone." This book is, first of all, probably the ultimate coffee table book. I mean, if you want to get something that will make you look smart and be great on your coffee table, this might be a good choice. But it's got a lot of different atlases, literally atlases in here, and it illuminates data and ideas that you just may not be thinking about. And so it's probably not a book that you would read cover to cover. It's more of one that you might kind of flip through, but really powerfully done and beautifully produced. I mean, the printing on here, there's like, you could probably kind of see there's like gold foil on there. It's printed really nicely as well, but a powerful idea and just an entertaining read, very visual and great. So congratulations to the team behind the Atlas of the Invisible. That is our most shareable non-obvious book. Most entertaining non-obvious book of 2022. Two more left, two more to go. And the next one that I will share with you is the most original book of 2022. And our choice for that is All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. And I'll give you a quote from this unique book. "The Western death industry is predicated on the idea that we cannot or need not be there. But if the reason we're outsourcing this burden is because it's too much for us, how do they deal with it? I want to know whether we are cheating ourselves out of some fundamental human knowledge by doing things this way." As you read this book, the first thing that you will discover is that the author has a probably unhealthy fascination with death, but she admits that. And what she talks about is where that fascination has led her. And the journey of the book takes you into so many different businesses that you might not even know exist. I mean, there is literally, one of the things I learned from this book is there's a company whose responsibility it is, after a national tragedy, after a big tragedy, to take care of all of the details. And like, for example, if there was a big fire, they will go onto the website of the company that suffered the fire and make sure that there's no images of fire on their website. basic stuff, or they'll make sure that if there's families of people who were involved in a tragedy staying at a hotel, there's not a wedding at that same hotel where people who are celebrating a wedding are right next to people who are mourning losing someone. Like, who thinks about that stuff? Well, apparently there's a company that does. And it's one of the elements of this entire industry around death. And what was interesting about this book was that it really took me behind the scenes of something that usually, well, I don't think about, and most people don't think about, and more importantly, that we're maybe a little afraid to think about. I mean, we don't really want to think about death. We don't want to think about our own death. We don't want to think about the death of loved ones. But really what this book explores is, what are we missing by sort of closing our eyes away from that topic? And so in this book is absolutely beautiful. It is a fascinating topic as well, and very original. I have not seen a book about that, and it really teaches much about how you can exist in the world and what you want to leave behind. I mean, the application for this one, though it may not seem necessarily like a business book, felt very motivating for me, because a big part of the legacy of what we often leave behind is the work that we do. And before you go, whenever that happens, you want to feel like you actually contributed something that was of value. And this book was a great reminder of that, even as it was a great expose of some of the businesses behind the death industry that you don't often think about. And so congratulations to Haley for All the Living and All the Dead, our pick for the most original non-obvious book of 2022. And the final choice for the non-obvious book awards winners is the most important book of 2022. And our pick for the most important book is Stolen Focus by Johann Hari. Stolen Focus: Why You Can't Pay Attention and How to Think Deeply Again. A big idea that can make the difference in the world and your life. And a quote from this book: "A life full of distractions is, at an individual level, diminished. When you are unable to pay sustained attention, you can't achieve the things you want to achieve. If this goes on for months and years, it scrambles your ability to figure out who you are and what you want. You become lost in your own life." Stolen Focus was our pick for the most important non-obvious book of 2022. It's a fascinating read. It has really caused me to think a little bit differently about attention, because distraction and attention are frequent topics, but the point that the author makes is that it's frequently being stolen. And so you have to reclaim it. You have to get it back. And the topics in the book and the way that it talks about how to do that is really fascinating. The writing is excellent. Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, our pick for the most important non-obvious book of 2022. So there you have it. That is our short list of the top 15 books, 10 on the short list, and 5 winners from our non-obvious book awards. There's a full list of 100 on the long list, and you can get access to all of those books by going to nonobviousbookawards.com/2022, and you can check out all of the different awards. And by the way, there's a link there to a bookshop store, where when you buy those books, the proceeds, some portion of the proceeds for all of those purchases will go towards supporting independent bookstores. So it's a great platform. If you're not familiar with bookshop.org, it's a way better place to buy books than other online platforms named after Brazilian rainforests. And it's a great way to support bookstores and purchase books as well. So check out bookshop.org. Check out our full shortlist winners and the 5 winners. And finally, make sure you subscribe to the Non-Obvious newsletter, which comes out every Thursday. Go to nonobvious.com/subscribe to join that. If you are an author, or if you love a non-obvious book review, which is my online show where I interview authors of fascinating books to talk to them about what makes their books non-obvious and how they can apply those lessons to the world. So if you are an author who was featured here, or an author who has a book and you're interested in being on the show, get in touch. And if you're just interested in books and you're fascinated by ideas, make sure to go and check out that show as well. Subscribe to the newsletter, and thank you for listening. So I'm Rohit Bhargava. This has been the Non-Obvious Book Review special edition of the shortlist announcement for the Non-Obvious Book Awards. Thanks for joining me. And remember, stay non-obvious.